Hey guys, welcome to the PilotJam on Saturday, September 23rd. We are heading fast into the holiday season. It's one of my favorite times of the year. And I'll tell you, it happens quick. Once you hit October, man, that's it. Halloween comes, then it's Thanksgiving, it's Black Friday, it's Christmas, it's all the stuff. So we're heading quickly into that time of year, man. We're heading into the holidays. I'm excited. It's one of my favorite times of the year because it cools off. It's nice to be outside. And of course, the holiday spirit kind of gets everybody, puts everyone in a good frame of mind, hopefully. So I love the holidays. Anyway, looks like Hobie was in first and Fast Freddy was kind of slow Freddy in second. Fred, one job, dude. You're sitting at home convalescing, one job, and Hobie beat you like a redheaded stepchild. I don't know what's up, man. Dan Griffiths, how you doing, Dan? Glad you can make it. Bradley Norton, likes in. That's cool. Everyone hit the like button on the way in. That's awesome. Thank you, Bradley. Thanks, John, Hobie, and Risto for the help this week. TX16 batteries came. Oh, cool. Good. Glad you got yourself worked out. Midwest RC is here. How you doing, Tim? Dang, I'm like fifth. Yeah. And you missed a few extra comments too, Tim. Cameron Dasso is here. Hi, fellas. Henry A. Hello. How are you? Mitch Gentry. Hi, all. How are you, Mitch? Glad you could make it. Stephen Harris. Hello from Alberta, Canada. Too windy for flying. We've seen some fall colors coming out of that area too, I see. Let's see who else is here. Terry Evans. Hello, good evening. Ken N. Hello from West Virginia. Great state, West Virginia. I like it there. It's pretty. Let's see. William Tam is here. Hello, William. Laura Harth is here. Hello, Laura. How are you? Mr. Skywriter. Keith, how's it going? Tim is here and Bill Cox is here. Well, we've got the crew, man. We got the crew tonight. And Jeff H. Hi from down under, down from Australia. I kind of figured Jeff would show up. We were going to talk electrical stuff tonight. He likes electricity. So anyway, it was a fun week on the week. Let's get into the week in review. It was a fun week because it was a lot of bench work this week. And I told you I was going to do it, right? I built the Admiral, and I also had it in my mind that I wanted to build one of these, just kind of a smaller unit. And really, this is just... I could tell by the comments. One of the things I liked about the comments was that some of the people got it. They're like, oh, hey, I do this, I do that. I liked it. One guy said he puts his in Tupperware. I was actually thinking about dunking the whole thing in water, getting rid of the fans, just putting a couple heat sinks on both sides, clamping it and dunking it in the water. Wouldn't that be cool? Lots of different ways to do this, and that was the whole point. Really, if you guys want to know the truth because you're hanging out on the Cool Kids channel, I do this kind of stuff to get you thinking. It's like a thought exercise in school, and not everybody knows that. Obviously, you could use this for a final product. I don't even know if I'll use this. I'll probably wind up giving it away. But the point of the matter is I make this stuff to get you thinking, to get you practicing and thinking about Ohm's law and how to do the math and how to come up with the solution, right? That's the part of the fun. And it is fun to make your own stuff. I mean, let's be honest. If you could make your own radio, would you? It's kind of fun to do it. But anyway, a couple of people caught on to that and they shared their ideas like, oh, hey, I do this and I do that. And I've been using light bulbs. One guy said I use ducted fans. There's all kinds of ways to do this kind of work. The point is it's fun to experiment with it, right? That's what makes it so great. And so I love getting the comments back where people share their ideas. And I like that kind of cross collaboration, ideation. It's how we grow, right? It's sharing information with each other. So I had a lot of fun with this one. It was a cheap little Lipo discharger. If you didn't see the video, check it out. I put the parts kit in Amazon. All the parts I got on Amazon are affiliate links in the video for this one. So if you'd like to make your own, and it's effective, it does the job. Put it on a little coaster or a piece of wood on your desk. Don't let the kids touch it because it'll get a little hot, but it'll take your batteries down for you. And by the way, I have actually been using, prior to making this device, that might be a reason to keep it. Prior to making this device, all I did was I took a black wire and I wrapped it around here. I took a red wire, wrapped it around this one, and I only had one resistor, and that was it. I'd literally take it outside. I've got a little piece of tin. I'd set the resistor on a piece of tin, connect the victim battery to it, and just let it die. And that's how I'd kill lipos when I had to get rid of a lipo battery. And it works. It's effective. One thing that did come up at the end of that, though, when these are done, when you've completely emptied a lipo battery and you solder the ends together, the mains, the positive and negative, and you solder them together, twist them together, solder them, the battery then becomes inert. And I said, you can throw it away. And a couple of people came back and said, no, please recycle, whatever. If you're going to recycle, that's great. If you want to save the planet, that's fine. If you recycle, great. The point was you can dispose of it without going through any special precautions outside of things like recycling. So if you are into recycling and that matters, go ahead. Of course, we have recycling, so I do actually separate papers and plastics for those of you who are curious about such things. But the point of the matter was not which bin you throw it in. It's that you could throw it in a bin. That was the real point in that messaging. So just throwing it out there, if you're not aware, you can do that. And I have verified that fact. Once you solder these together, it's really nothing more than the physical material you see. It's not like there's chemicals, like you don't do that with lead acid because acid seeps into the ground, right? It seeps into the ground. You don't want to do that. There's nothing harmful when these are made inert in terms of chemicals that can do things like corrupt the water table. It just becomes litter at that point. So dispose of it according to your own belief system, but it's okay to not take any special precaution. Like you don't have to take it to a battery center. That was the moral of the story. But, you know, one thing that this channel has taught me is that people in radio control can be very specific, literal, quite specific about things. So I figured I'd just throw that out there for a little clarification. Anyway, the next video was the battery bank in the car. That was fun. I gotta tell you though, I have some pictures and some stuff that is actually going to be topical for the night. But I got to tell you, when I started messing around with these batteries, and if you're not familiar with what happened there, I went out and bought a couple of LIFE batteries, and they're 100 amp hour. I got these. They're also on Amazon, but I got these 100 amp hour batteries. They're 12 volt, 12.5, whatever the nominal voltage of LIFE is. But they're 12 volt, and I put them in series. And the one thing that really messed with me, and I was actually on Discord talking with Rob about it, like, dude, I've been charging these things for 19 amps for like an hour and a half and they're still not done. I'm kind of wondering if the BMS is broke, right? But I had to wrap my head around the actual capacity in a 100 amp hour battery times 2, times 2 of them. It's a lot of juice, man. They were drinking the amperage, but we have some stuff to talk about there. We're going to talk a little bit about that and about how you think about converting things like amperage on AC to amperage on DC and watt hours and amp hours. We're going to talk a little bit about that stuff tonight. So anyway, it was kind of exciting, and I was really interested in the whole process because LIFE batteries are kind of new to me. And one other thing that I wanted to talk about too, really briefly, was that in that video, I mentioned that I bought a specialized LIFE charger, and it is this thing. Now, the reason I got this, because some people came back and said, hey, you know, if you have a standard like lithium charger, like the iCharger, for example, it actually has an LIFE profile on it, and it works. I used it on the bench. It works. So yes, that is true. However, the reason I opted for one of these, 2 reasons. Number one, this is kind of a monkey-proof design. Really, it's not like a hobby design. It's more like an end-user consumer design. And what I liked about it was that it has a memory. So if I put this in my car and I plug it into the inverter in my car, and then this thing goes to the battery, I'm not sitting in the car futzing around with the navigation wheel or looking for settings or setting amperage or anything else. You simply press the mode button and it just changes between current, the amount of current that you're feeding the battery. And by the way, it does auto voltage detection for you. So it'll detect on its own what the chemistry is and what voltage it should be charging. So if you connect it to a 12 volt source, see how it says 12 to 24, it'll actually switch between them automatically. You don't have to do anything. So you just plug it in and go, and then you set the mode. In my car, it happens to be a 100 watt inverter. So when I set it at 30%, I'm seeing about 3 amps. So that works for my car. That's about 75 watts, right? If I go higher than that, it gets it really close to 100 watts, and I don't want it tripping. So for that reason, 3 amps is fine. So you set the mode button to 30%, plug it in, turn the car on, you're done. And you don't have to worry about it. It just takes care of the rest. And keep in mind, those batteries have BMSs in them as well. So the BMS, what happens, by the way, in case you're curious about it, when the BMS says no more and it's done, it opens the circuit. And on the charger, you see a message that says disconnect, circuit disconnect. That's what I saw on the iCharger. On this one, it just says full. But it does read that indicator that the circuit is now open after it's been in a charge mode. And it says, hey, it's full. The BMS must have set enough, so it considers it full and stops charging. So anyway, This is just a really convenient option for putting in the car or the garage. And I didn't want to do that with my iCharger. I didn't want to have this knocking around inside the car. I thought this would just be an easier answer. But of course, there are plenty of ways to do this. You know, if you have an iCharger and you don't want to use a dedicated, of course you can use one of these. Yeah, definitely. No problem. Again, it's one of those things. The internet, the YouTube teaches you, man. People are very specific about stuff. But yeah, I did this for convenience sake, right? Because now I can leave this on my shelf in the garage. I don't have to bring it in. It's not part of my charger stash. I don't have to really worry about any settings. I just plug it in and that's it. Just all I have to do is connect the battery and it does the rest. So it's kind of like it's kind of like a smart charger, I guess. All right. Anyway, so that was that. That was the all the power system, and that was a fun video. Boy, I'll tell you what. We're going to talk a little bit about the math tonight. Because I had the hardest time wrapping my head around the capacity here. And I understand it. You know, it's not like I'm a monkey with the football with this stuff. I kind of understand it, but it's just weird to see things like a battery that charges for 2 hours at 20 amps and not be full. If you're charging, like I always used to consider a 6S 5000 a big battery. This is a 6S 1800. I used to consider a 6S 5000 a big battery. Not anymore. Not anymore. These LIFE batteries are big. There's a lot of capacity. And compared to like power walls and cars, they're not even that big. It's almost like the solar system thing. When you think about, you say, wow, the earth is really big, but not really. Compare it to the sun and it's tiny. And then if you compare our sun, you think, oh, the sun is really big. Not really. When you compare it to Stevenson, what is it? Stevenson 2-8, the sun looks like the earth when the earth is measured against the sun, right? It's crazy. Like the biggest star that we know about can cover the orbit of Jupiter from being placed in the center of our solar system. So it's crazy. That's how batteries get when you start getting bigger and bigger. The capacity it gets mind-blowing. Like it's mind-blowing. You just have to, but doing the math is important. And then, of course, the PilotJam. So it's been a fun week. It's been a bench-oriented week, to be sure. A lot of time on the bench this week, having a lot of fun. But messing around with electricity and kind of diving a little deeper and coming up with solutions. For me, I'm very, very excited to use my battery bank in the car. I can't wait because I've got 25 amps of constant power, and it's clean power because it's coming off a battery, so no ripple. You know, it's going to be very clean input power. And it'll definitely service every charge need that I have at the field. The only question I have is capacity, and we're going to get into some of that for sure. So let me check the comments, and then we're going to get into content here. I'm going to just make sure that I haven't missed anybody. Zeb is here from China. How you doing, Zeb? William Tam, everyone behaving. So Santa bring you a new heli. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Santa bring a new heli for Christmas. That'd be fun. How you doing, Off Axis? Off Axis FPV is here. And let's see, Little One-on-One is here. How you doing? And let's see, T Evans, RC Cat, our HRB batteries good for EDF jets. You know, I've been flying these HRBs in my helicopters, and helicopters can put some load on, I would say probably secondary to an EDF jet, and it certainly depends a little bit on the EDF jet, of course. But all I can say is that these batteries have been flying my helicopters, wrong desktop here. We want this one. These have been flying my 380 class helicopters for a couple of years now, a year and a half, I think, and they still look like they're brand new. So they're very firm, no puffiness. So, you know, it really comes down to looking, you know, people will joke about the C rating because it's rarely accurate and it's not relative. It's only relative within a brand, you know, all of those rules. But all I can say is so far the performance of these have been good in my helicopters. So I'll put it that way. And they're not puffing. And the flight time is very, very repeatable. I'll put it that way. And as I said, helicopters can be pretty tough on batteries as well. Although nothing in my mind compares to EDFs when it comes to beating up batteries. All right, really cool, Jeff. I'm joining up okay. Don't really care about the holidays. Never been a happy time. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Mark. I love the holidays. I'm sorry if they're not happy for you, though. That's unfortunate. All right. Guess you don't need that 24-volt hookup at the field anymore. Yeah. FL engineer, guess you don't need it. Well, you know, it'd still be nice to have it because, you know, I can also charge the batteries with that hookup. Just saying. Four Eyes is here. How you doing, Four Eyes? All right. Let's get into content. Let's get going here. We have some material to get into. So what is up first? Okay. LIFE batteries. I figured we'd spend a little time on this because for me, LIFE batteries are new. They're a new thing to me. And what I thought we would do, what I wanted to do is give you a little bit, because I didn't go over the specs in detail on the video, but I wanted just to, and I promise you, we're not going to sit here and read the book, but I just wanted to show you a couple of things on the spec sheet on this on these batteries really quickly, just to kind of put these put the battery in perspective for you. Nominal capacity 100 amp hours. So if you're not sure what that means, if you're used to dealing with these types of batteries, just add 3 zeros. So this is basically a 100,000 milliamp hour battery. That's one of them. And I have 2. Now keep in mind, because I'm not putting them in parallel, that does not make them, because if you put them in parallel, then you double the capacity. So it would be 200 amp hours, but I'm connecting mine in series. So there's still 100 amp hours. However, the watt hours, because we're putting them in series, the watt hours double. So if you look at the energy 1280, you can double that. It basically comes out to 2460, right? 2560, something like that. So just keep that in mind. The watt hour density, that's kind of what we're looking at. And by the way, we're going to talk about this in a little bit. I've been using that watt hour number quite a bit to make comparisons, because it is very handy, because it takes voltage out of the equation and it takes your milliamp hour thing out of the equation as well. It gives you a real idea of what kind of capacity are you actually dealing with. So it is a pretty big battery at 1280 watt hours. And then I also thought I'd show you the standard charge current, 20 amps. And when I got the batteries in their storage state, it took me about 2.5 hours to charge them up at 20 amps each. So that's a lot, man. Think about charging a battery at the field. If you charge a 6L5000, if you are at storage voltage at 3.85 and you charge at 1C, it's going to take you about 20 to 25 minutes, right? That's the math. It's just the way it works out. 20 to 25 minutes. These things you're charging them from storage at 20 amps for 2.5 hours. It's ludicrous. But also look at this. It's 0.2C. It's not even 1C. It's like 20% of 1C. You can charge them at 100 amps. If you can find something to deliver it, you can charge them at 100 amps. Maybe you've got a car that can deliver that kind of power. Maybe like a Tesla charging station or something like that might do it. But the reason they say standard, we'll get into this in a little bit, but 20 amps, that's the charge current. You need some real juice to be able to charge at 1C on these batteries. And then the rated discharge current, 50 amps. So remember, we're in series. You can't increase that. If you were in parallel, it'd be 100. You'd be at 100 amps, but we're not. We're in series. So 50 amps, that's the max. But if you remember the video on my panel, charging 2 6L5000s at 2C, that's 10 amps each. So if I'm doing 2 of those at a time, that's 20 amps. I'm at like less than half of the rated discharge current for these batteries. So that's it. They're a very good solution. That's really what I wanted to show you. That's what I wanted to show you in the book. And I also wanted to point out charge temperature. Look at the temperatures down here at the bottom. 131. Storage temperature, 113 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the storage temperature of these. So we're going to go over, I've got a web page I want to bring up, and I promise you, we're not going to read the whole thing, but I want to show it to you so you see it. So that's enough for the book. I want to go ahead and by the way, this link is in the description for you as well. So you might say, well, wait a minute. How come we're not, LiPo is the thing we use in our models. Why are we now switching over to life batteries? What's the deal? And the deal is real simple. Life batteries do not have the same density as LiPo. They just don't. They're not as dense in terms of power as LiPo. What they are though, is they're very stable batteries. So here's a question that they have on this page. This is lithiumhub.com. Link is in the description if you want to read this article. But what makes life batteries better? And here is the material. The life battery isn't great for wearable devices like watches because they have lower energy density. So our LiPo batteries are more dense, right? They're more compact. So in other words, you can put more energy in a smaller package with the LiPo. Lithium iron phosphate, they take a little bit more space. They're not as compact. That said, for things like solar energy systems, golf carts, bass boats, it's best by far. But why? So here's the big one. This is the big one, and this is why I ended up settling on these. And it's because the cycle life of these batteries is 4 times lithium ion and or lithium polymer batteries. 4 times the cycle life. So when you look at the literature on all these batteries, they come out and say you can do 3 to 4, 5, 6, 8,000 cycles. And a lot of your cycle life has to do with how hard you discharge and charge the batteries. So you get a tremendous amount of cycle life out of these batteries, which means they'll last. And check this out. They can reach 100% depth of discharge because it doesn't damage them if you do. You cannot do that on a Lipo, right? You simply can't do that. So in the video, I said I expect somewhere around 90%, somewhere. It might be 85. I've seen a lot of different testing. It could be 85. It could be 95. This paper says it can go up to 100. So when it comes to the watt hour density, you can use a fairly high number. I'm going to go ahead until I have the math, until I have the real experience utilizing the system. I'm going to go ahead and assume about 85 to 90%. So 85 is a little pessimistic. 90 is probably a little optimistic. So somewhere probably in that range is what I expect. But 100% depth of discharge on these batteries without damaging them. And oh, by the way, the batteries that I got, they also include a BMS. So it doesn't really matter what the charger thinks. The BMS, the profile is handled within the battery itself. And that's programmed according to the manufacturer's specifications. So when you have a BMS on the life battery that comes from the manufacturer, I'm sure it's set correctly based on the chemistry for the battery. You can also use it for a long period of time. In fact, you can use quality life batteries for many years longer. It's rated 5,000 cycles. That's roughly about 10 years. Here's the other big reason. Lithium battery safety is important. Everybody, in fact, there was even a comment. Someone goes, did you install a fire extinguisher? Here's the deal. These batteries are highly stable. They don't explode and they're incombustible. Check out this section right here. It says they're incombustible. Life batteries have the safest lithium chemistry. Why? It's because lithium iron phosphate have better thermal and structural stability. This is something lead acid and most other battery types don't have at the level LiFePO4 does. LiFePO4 is incombustible. It can withstand high temperatures without decomposing. It's not prone to thermal runaway and will keep cool at room temperature. And then that's about it. The rest of it, those are the two big keys. But I wanted to share this with you because you might say, well, why do we get away from LiPo and why do we go to LiFePO? And the two big ones for me were the longevity of the cycle life, being able to cycle it, and the fact that the chemistry basically makes it incombustible. So for use in a car, especially if you're traveling with some big batteries inside the car, that's not a terrible thing to have. So again, I'm going to have the links for this in this website in the description if you'd like to check it out on yourself and do a little bit more reading about it. But I read this article and I thought, yeah, that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense to me to switch and use that profile for my portable battery bank for use at the field. And that's why I made the switch. So that's the main bit on the life batteries that I wanted to share. I wanted to give you a little look at the manual and then give you a little look at a web page to give you a little bit of background information about why I made that choice to use life batteries for the battery bank. But there's more. There's more. We're going to cover a little bit of electrical math now. Stay. Do not freaking hang up the phone or the video. Stay. It's a little bit electrical math, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun stuff. You'll learn something. I've been learning about this and really thoroughly enjoying this. So let's get into a little bit of electric math. All right. We're going to have, don't leave. Just stay. Just don't do it. Just stay around. I swear it's going to be fun. Okay. So what I wanted to do is I will make this available as well. Let me move this up and zoom in a little bit so you guys can maybe see the numbers just a little bit easier. Hopefully that's easier to read. There we go. All right. So what I wanted to do is give you guys a little bit of electrical math and we're going to have a little experiment. So while we're talking about this, there's a pop quiz. The pop quiz is, if you have an AC charger that's connected to 120 volts on your wall, you don't know what the current draw is because you don't have a clamp meter or any other way to measure it. Okay, so don't cheat. And you are feeding it to a 25 volt battery at 19 amps. What is your current draw on your AC circuit? Now, the reason I'm bringing that question up is because when I first started looking at these batteries and I thought, wow, I can charge the individual battery at 20 amps. I'm going to go ahead and get myself, well, I got to bring the camera on here. I'm going to go ahead and get two of these. I'm going to get two of these and I can charge both the batteries at 20 amps and I can really, get done quickly because if it's going to take an hour and a freaking half at 20 amps that means I'm going to be charging batteries for 3 or 4 hours, right? No, I decided I'm going to get two, but then I thought, wait a minute. If I'm charging at 20 amps, man, I can't do that. My circuit on that wall is only 20 amps. You can't do that. But I was way wrong. I was way wrong. So this is a pop quiz. This is a pop quiz. You got to do the math here. If you've got 120 volts AC on your wall, on your charger. So remember, the charger that I'm using, this charger, I keep moving my controls out of my way. So this is a charger I'm using. It's got an AC power right there. Okay, so AC in, and I'm feeding 25 volts on the outside at 19 amps. What am I doing on my wall? Okay, so that's the pop quiz. Now we're going to do a little bit of math while you guys work the pop quiz out. Okay, so the math is, now remember, the watt hours of that battery, I have it set, you can hopefully see the formula up top. I have it set at 2,500 times about 85%. That's my pessimistic view. So what I'm saying is that my watt hours are 2125. So if I have 2125 watt hours, that's connecting 2 life batteries, 100 amp hours in series, 25 volts. That means I get 2125 watt hours. The reason that I'm using this number for my calculation is because I want the pessimistic view on how many cycles I can get out of my batteries, okay? Now, the little calculator here has the milliamp hours on the left-hand side. So we've got 4,000, 5,000, and I left a couple 5,000s in there so we can mess around, okay? So 4,000 at six cells, and I multiply the 6 cells times the peak. So I always use the peak voltage because that's a worst-case scenario. I know, guys, that sometimes it's not the peak voltage. I'm aware of that. But for math purposes, you're trying to find the worst-case scenario, you look at the peak voltage and say, okay, let's multiply it times peak. That'll tell me my worst-case current draw and my worst-case scenario, right? Okay, so 25.2 volts, that's worst case. Now, usable MAH, same math, right? I did the same formula. I said, let's take the milliamp hours on my flight pack and multiply it by 85%, which actually does come out very, very close, depending on your battery. I measured a couple 6L 5000s, and it was almost dead nuts on 85%. I measured a couple of 2200s, and they were a little worse. It was more like 75%. So a little bit of variance in this number, but 85 is a reason, again, worst case scenario. 6L 5000 that I had at storage at 375, it was about 85% in terms of milliamp hours. So I wound up putting on the 6L 5000, I did wind up putting about 4250 back in. So that's usable milliamp hours. And then we convert it. Here's the coup de grace, right? This is the coup de grace part. The watt hour, we're converting to watt hours. So when you do watt hours, if you're not familiar with what this means, to calculate watt hours, all you need to do is volts times amp hours equals watt hours. It's the same formula that everyone's familiar with. Volts times amps equals watts. Volts times amp hours equals watt hours. And if you're not sure how to get amp hours, all you do is take your milliamp hours times 1,000. That's all you do. So you can simply replace MAH with AH when you change the MAH number, when you multiply that by 1,000. That gives you your amp hour number, okay? So or divide it by 1,000. I'm sorry. Divide your milliamp hour by 1,000. It gives you your amp hours. So that's it. Simple math. Now what that means is that if we take a 100 amp hour battery and we divide and we want to convert that to milliamp hours, we multiply that times 1,000. That means a 100 amp hour battery is 100,000 milliamp hours, and vice versa. We got a 32,000 milliamp hour battery. We lop the zeros off, and that means we have a 32 amp hour battery. Okay. So that's why we're converting everything to watt hours. If we convert to watt hours, now we know we can do regardless of voltage, we can do a very direct calculation that says, if I've got 2125 watt hours at my disposal and I'm going to use 85 watt hours to charge a 6L 4000, then you simply do the math. You divide the watt hours that you have divided by the watt hours it takes for a cycle, and that gives you this answer. So all you do is divide the two out, and there you go. Now you can do a calculation and predict how many cycles you should get on your battery bank, and that's all I did here. Very simple formula. So let's mess around with this a little bit just to get that. Now you don't understand the math part. Let's mess around with it a little bit. Let's do, here's the 5,000 milliamp hour battery right here in this one. It's 6 cells, 25.2 volts. I have a usable MAH of 4250. That means I'm at about 107 watt hours. That means my battery bank should give me somewhere around 20. I see the guys in the chat talking about efficiency and conversion losses. That's all true. You lose stuff in heat. Okay, you lose stuff. Jeff says it should be MAH divided by 1,000. Yes, he's right. That's right. It's amp hours. He's right. Thanks, Jeff, for catching that. It's amp hours milliamp hours divided by 1,000 for amp hours. Thanks, Jeff, for catching that. So back to the topic. Yeah, you're going to lose some stuff in heat. You have when you feel heat, that's energy loss, right? When you feel heat, that is energy loss. You're gonna lose a little energy when that happens. And you do have conversion losses. So when you're switching from AC to DC, there's a little bit of conversion loss or an efficiency loss there as well. So again, these are kind of theoretical. Let's keep that in mind that we're talking theoretic, right? In the math, we're just talking the math. We're not talking about lab grade specifics here, right? We're just talking about what the math tells us. Okay, so there's an example for a 6L 5000. We should get somewhere around 20, give or take. And then let's do a different example. Let's take a 2200 milliamp hour battery. So 2200, and instead of 6 cells, let's just do a 3 cell. So we convert that to a 3 cell. That means we're at 12.6 volts peak. Our usable milliamp hours is 1870. Our watt hours are 23. That means we should be able to charge about 90 cycles of a 3 cell 2200. Isn't that crazy? Let's do a, I don't know. Let's do, you guys, I don't know. How about a 2650 4 cell? I use those a lot. Let's try a 2650 4 cell. That's 16.8 volts, usable MAH of 2252, watt hours 37, 56 cycles of a 4 cell 2650. You see what I mean about that analogy I gave with the solar system? It starts to kind of blow your mind away a little bit. Like those 2 batteries that I have are able to charge a 2650 4 cell 56 times before we lose out on our capacity. Right. So very cool. Again, I'm not sure if I said it or not. I will put this calculator up on my server if you guys want to download it later. But I wanted to show you something else next. I haven't forgot about the pop quiz. We're going to come back to that. But here's the other thing that I wanted to show you. I did a little bit of poking around. I looked at these little solar generators. I was really interested. I really wanted one of these solar generators. I was interested in one. I wanted one. And I did some pricing, and the 2 reasons I didn't get them, number one, because you're paying for a lot of stuff you don't need in this use case, right? In the use case that I have where I have a DC box already with DC chargers, the solar generators, they all have DC outputs, but the DC outputs are always limited. They're like 12 volts, 10 amps, that kind of thing. That's not a lot. It's 120 watts, not a lot. And then not only that, from a price perspective, you're also paying for other things like, wireless charging, the fancy case, the LCD screen. They're cool and they're kind of interesting. I'm still kind of interested in one of those, but I went out and did a little bit of pricing. When I did the math, the VTO Jumpman 1800 came out at 45 cents per watt hour. So did this All-We 2000 watt, 45 cent, and the Nuvo Pax, 45 cents. Isn't that something? They all came out, every one of them, didn't matter what size, what their watt hour capacity was, it just didn't matter. They all came out to be very close in price. Then I looked at these this is another one that I considered doing. I considered grabbing 3 of these 32,000 milliamp hours. That would give me 100 amp hours, right? Almost. Give me 30, 60, 96 amp hours. Very close. Remember, these are already 6 cell. So it's a full, approximately 2,200 watt hours. But the problem with that is every one of these are $422. So that would have cost $1,269. It would have been the lightest solution of all at 19 pounds. We would have got some pretty good watt hour density out of it, but it was the most expensive solution by a stretch. 52 cents per watt hour. 52 cents per watt hour. The one that I got, the Life batteries. So they're a little bigger. Yes, they're a little bigger. But if you look at their price at $500, 2,500 watt hours, 50 pounds on weight. So they're the heaviest solution. No surprise. That goes directly to the comment I read earlier. They're not as dense in terms of power as Lipo, right? So no surprise that they're heavier, right? There's no surprise about this. If you're looking at this one going, well, wait, that's only 2 pounds difference from that one. Don't forget this one also, I don't know what chemistry this one has. I didn't write it down, but it also has a plastic surround and other stuff with it, right? So there's a screen and a DC inverter and other things that go along with the solar generator. So keep that in mind in terms of weight. But look at the price. When you do the math, it came out to 20 cents per watt hour. So it turned out to be a highly cost-effective solution. All right, let's go back to our pop quiz. The way we figure this out is you do the math. So you got to figure out what your watts are. And that's the trick, because I left that unlabeled. So if we put our watts in and say, okay, we can figure out watts out, volts times amps equals watts. So we can do equals, this is F22 times G22. That means we're at 475 watts. Once you know your watts demand, then you can simply translate that over to your current, right? So if you know watts, you can divide it by your volts, and that'll tell you your current. So if we take our this is H22, and divide that by D22, we divide it by our volts on AC, 3.96. So Wooter got it at 3.96. Jeff was right in there at 4, so you guys are right in there. And of course, you have some efficiency losses. So the reason I brought this up is because, like I said, when I plugged in the charger, I thought, oh, wow, 19 amps, that's cool. And then I thought about my household circuit, and I thought, wait, 19 amps, wait, that's killing my circuit. And then I thought, no, that's not the way this works. You gotta rethink the way this works, okay? So about 3.9, give or take, right? And on a household circuit, 4 amps, no problem. That's no problem. And you can actually put 2 of them on the same circuit, and they'll charge batteries very happily. You'll be dumping 19, 20 amps into your batteries as you go along. So I hope you guys enjoyed that little section. That was just a little bit of electric math. And again, I'll make the spreadsheet available. It's really fun to put tools like this together because it allows you to design and create the specifications for the system according to your needs and according to your use case. You know, I was thinking about these batteries, and I thought, you know, if I were just going to go out for an FPV day or a foamy day, I could just bring one of those 100 amp hour batteries, use it in, you know, it's not in parallel or series, single battery, it's 12S, but it's 100 amp hours. I can charge a lot of freaking 3-cell 2200s with that battery. So it's a really nice solution for not a lot of money, especially compared to Lipo. And that's really what I wanted to share with you guys. So I hope you found that interesting or entertaining, and maybe hopefully you learned something about it. Okay. That is that. I see a little bit of chit chat. Thanks again for the correction on the spreadsheet, Jeff. Appreciate you. And then let's go into the next topic. So the next topic is channel management. Okay. I did this one because I wanted to show you guys that there are a couple of different ways to think about it. And the reason, here's why I'm doing this. Flaps. I don't know what it is with flaps, man. I don't understand it. I don't understand what the problem is with flaps, but people have like crazy issues with flaps. And I wanted to show you guys all a couple of different ways to think about managing outputs on your radio. Okay. So on this, I have a switch up on top, and I'm just going to show you. I have SA, that's SE, SE, SA, and my slider. So these are 3 switches I'm going to use, okay? No trick photography here, but I want you to see the monitor. So right now I'm moving SE, and watch the movement. See how we're going on SE? We're going from 60 to 30, and then all the way down to negative 80, okay? That's one. Next one I want to show you is SA. So on SA, I've got negative 20, I've got 0, and I've got positive 20 when I move the SA switch. And then for channel 6, that's on my slider, I have negative 20, 0, and positive 20. There's a couple of different ways to do this, and I wanted to give you guys a look because it's a question that comes up so many times with questions like flaps and modes on flight controllers and gyros. So I wanted to show you how to take control of this. There's a couple of different ways to do it. The first one I'm going to show you is in what's called a special function channel override. And when you see this, you're probably going to be like, oh man, I knew that. I knew that because you do it for your throttle override all the time. But all I did in this example, and I'm not sure if it's just my monitor screen or if it's actually happening live. I can't really tell, but I'm seeing this little cross hatching. Okay. So here it is. All I did was I made a special function with an override. I had to get my pencil. Shut up. Don't judge me. All right, here's my override. So SA up. All this says is when SA is in the up position, I want you to override channel 5 with negative 20. That's it. So if I hit the model button, there's no mix. And look at channel 5. SA is in the up position, I'm at negative 20. When I put SA in the mid position, it's 0. And when I put SA in the down position, it's 20. And by the way, here's the trippy part about it. There's no mix. There's no mix. This is simply a channel override on output. No mix. I'll prove it by showing you the mixer. So if we look at the mixer, notice how I go channels 2, 3, 4, and then 6. There's no mix line. So with no mix line, there's no channel 5 in the mixer. There is a channel 5 specified in the outputs. And if you look at the outputs, I don't know if it's going to show it right there at the top, right? But there's no mixer. That's why when you move that switch, there's no movement on this line, because this line measures the change in the mixer itself, okay? So you can change the output value on a channel simply by going into your special functions, not your logical switches, your special functions, and writing an override. And you can set that value to whatever you want. So I did this one just to show you that we can do -20, 0, and 20. You might use that for flaps and spoiler-ons, you know, so like -20 would be flaps down, 0 could be flaps parked, and 20 could be flaps up in a spoiler-on configuration. And you could even, if you had a 4-position switch, you could add more. You could add you could use your 6-position switch for this and say, well, I want to assign, you know, flaps down, flaps up a quarter, flaps up half, flaps parked, flaps, you know, you can get crazy with this stuff depending on the switch that you want to use. You simply can do it with channel overrides. Okay, so that's one method of doing channel overrides. Let's talk about another one. I'm going to go back into the mixer, and I showed you guys the channel 6 where I have it on a slider, and you can see the slider goes from 20 to 0 to -20, okay? The way I'm doing that is right here, my slider is channel 6, so we're going to edit that, and I have a curve. That's the second way you can manage your stop points on an output. So if I long press on this curve, that lets me edit the curve. Now remember, in the monitor, I showed you 20, 0, and -20, right? So if I say, well, I want just a flat line, I could set these to all to 0. And now, as I move my pitch, see, Freddie already knows what I'm doing. As I move my mixer, let me get out of here and click this. As I move my mixer, nothing's happening because we're at 0. We just flattened it out. So I'm moving my slider, nothing's happening because we set everything to 0. So there's no output. Okay, so now if I go into my mixer and change it again, I can say, well, by the way, the reason I brought that up is because that's throttle. When we do throttle on helicopters, you have a flat line. So it doesn't matter where your collective is, your throttle is a flat line. And we normally assign throttle to a switch. So we use a switch and we have a flat curve. So the throttle, no matter where we are, the throttle is constant. It's held constant. Okay. So, and that way you can use your left stick for collective pitch, which allows your pitch to go up and your pitch to go down. So that's a use case in a helicopter and where you might do that. But again, if you were maybe dealing with flaps, you can change your pitch curve and control your start and stop points. Let's do something different than 20. And you can control your start and stop points simply by adding those different stop points to your curve. So that's another way to control how the outputs on your radio land. The third one really is a bleed over, and it's still using a curve. But the reason I'm showing you a curve is because the curve is kind of simple, but I want you to think about curve 2 as something like a gyro mode switch. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I've had gyros in the past where they insisted, they said, well, you know, if the switch is down, it's here, and if the switch is here, it's off. You know, let me give you the example. If the switch is down, it's in auto level mode. If the switch is in the middle position, the gyro is off. And if the switch is in the up position, it's in stabilize mode. I don't like that. That's not the way I want my radio to work. I want my gyro to be off, stabilized, and auto level. Okay? That's how I want mine to work. The reason I'm showing you this curve is because this is a way you can make your switch position marry up to what they're specifying in the manual for the gyro. Okay? So all you have to do is create a curve. We're going to go into our mixer. And I'm going to look at SC, which should be, I have it on channel, where is it? Oh, I don't have SC assigned. I have SA assigned. So we're going to use, did I delete SA as well? We'll use SE. SE will be the switch. So SE will, no, you know what? I'm just going to change it. It's easy to change. There. Now it's SC. Now it's the way I want it. Okay, so now when I move my SC switch, there's my mode switch, okay? Now all we have to do is figure out, okay, what does this thing need to see? So we can go into our channel 7 and say if that were our mode channel, and we can edit this and then edit the curve. And let's say, for example, when the switch is in the down position, here I've got -100, 0, and 100, okay? So if sorry, I'm looking at the wrong number. It's 60, 30, and -80. Okay, so if they're saying in the down position, I need this value to be, say, 988 microseconds. All I would have to do is lower this to -100, and I would be there. So when I look at the monitor now, I can see that I'm 988 when I'm in the down position, okay? Now you can edit the curve and say, all right, for our middle position, which is where I want it to be in stabilized mode, if they want it to be at, say, 2000 microseconds, all I would have to do is change this to 100. And then if I back out and look at our monitor, when I put it in the middle position, there it is, 2000 microseconds. Okay, so the point of the matter is that it's a 3-position switch, and when I put it down, I'm at 988. When I put it in the middle, I'm at 2012. And then to finish this off, if they say if you want it in auto level mode, then that one needs to be at 0, say 1500 microseconds rather. Then we would set this value to 0, and when we do that and back out, see how goofy that curve looks? It looks ridiculous, right? That's not a curve, but it is. It is. So if I back out and I look at the mode switch now when I'm in the up position, I'm at 1500 US. So this is a second way using curves where you can force the radio switch position, the physical position, to match the output required of the gyro. Okay. So if your gyro says, hey, 988 is auto level mode, and 1500, this mode right here, is off, and then 2000 microseconds is stabilized mode, then you can simply go in and add a curve to your switch and force that microsecond output based on the curve position values that you set up. Okay. That's all I wanted to show. A little bit of channel management, a couple of ways to force the radio to do what you want. When I first got started in radio control, I got so frustrated with this because I had radios. Oh, check out, there's the batteries in the car. Isn't that cool? They're so tucked in there, nice and tight. It's perfect. Anyway, I got really frustrated because I had these gyros that insisted on a certain switch position, and I didn't want that switch position. I wanted it to be my way. So I wanted to show you guys how to utilize curves and overrides to force an output based on what you want it to be. So this works for flaps, it works for mode switches, works for landing gear, nav lights, camera switches, whatever thing you can come up with, you can force it to do what you want it to do, what you need it to do. Hopefully that makes sense. So that was the channel management bit that I wanted to cover with you guys. And before I move on, I'm going to check comments and then we'll get going here. Remember, guys, okay, Jeff took off. Remember, guys, if you like the effort John puts in the channel, please consider joining on Patreon. Thank you for that, Hobie. Oh, and by the way, we do have something a little special for the patrons tonight, by the way. Four Eyes says, needs a like check all. Yeah, definitely hit the like button, no doubt. Heli pilots get it up quicker, says Freddie. Yeah, they also land quicker too, dude. I'm just saying. You can use a curve to remix a switch output. Sure you can. I just showed you that. Yep. Yeah. See, Brandon says, oh, that's fun. Didn't know you could use the curve for a gyro. Sure you can. You can apply a curve. See, there you go. That's worth the price of admission right there. You guys all learned something new. That's why I cover this stuff. It teach you new stuff. Okay. That is, I think that's it for comments. So let's move on to the next subject. And the next subject, is the patron giveaway. So I did something a little fun. I talk about the patrons every week. And this week I gave away a couple of radios. And I did it on patreon.com. But tonight is the second giveaway for one of these. And it is a TX12. It's a Mark II Express ELRS TX12. We're going to give this one away. And I've got a workspace dedicated for this. Let me pop this up here. And we're going to switch over to the workspace. And what I did, the patrons already know what's up. The ones that entered, they know because they sent an email. We've already had an exchange. There were 14 entries. There were 14 entrants in the contest for the patrons. And you guys know who you are because I sent you an email. You sent me one. I sent you one back. So you guys, everyone that's in knows who they are. And all the patrons that entered, they have a number. They have a number. And they all know what their number is. I'm not going to disclose those on the channel. Well, I guess I could. It's right here. There's the list. There's the list of the numbers. And by the way, I've got two Stevens. I got two Steven C's, one in Virginia, one in Mississippi. Isn't that interesting? They both signed up. Anyway, so there's 14 entries, guys, and we're going to do a spin here. So all I'm going to do is spin this little wheel. It's a random number picker, and you can see I've already kind of got it populated for the 1 through 14 numbers. And it's just this little random number deal that I've found on the internet. So I'm going to spin this, and whoever's number comes up, they win themselves a TX12 Mark II Express LRS. So hopefully you're ready. Hopefully the patrons are here watching this one. And here we go. We're just going to spin. By the way, I gave away another radio today, this week too. I gave away a Jumper T-Lite Pro. Or no, V2. A V2. Number 7 is the winner. So number 7, that looks like Greg. So Greg, congratulations. You won yourself a TX12. I already have your email address or your mailing address. I will get this out sometime next week. It'll be a couple of days, but it'll go out. It'll go out next week. Congratulations, Greg. You got yourself a TX12 Express LRS Mark II. So basically a brand new little radio, and that is going to a happy new home where some happy patron named Greg is going to be flying it, hopefully. I need something in the camera. All right, so that's that. I'm going to go ahead and check comments, and then we'll get moving again. How do you hit the tip jar? I got 5 on green. Fred, 7 was yellow, bud, so I'll take your $5. You can put that in a tip jar. How do you hit the tip jar? I don't know. There's got to be a way to do it in there. I guess you got to hit one of those little buttons. I'm not sure. I don't hit it. I don't hit the tip jar on mine. Stephen Harris is nice. You're the best, John. Well, thank you, Stephen. Hey, by the way, I really kind of like the way I ran this one. So I think what I'm going to do going forward for contest, I like this one the best because it gave everybody a fair shot. So I put a note out on patreon.com and I said, hey, if you like this, all you have to do is send me an email. Tell me you want it, and I'll give you a number. If you send me an email, I'll give you a number. If you don't get a number back from me within about 6 hours, you didn't enter, so ask again. So everyone that sent me an email, they all got a number, and I just took a record of who put in submissions. And that way, when I did there was no time constraint. That's what I liked about it. Now, if you remember the FMS video, there was a time constraint. I had to do it live. So the thing I liked about this one is everyone had a couple of days. It wasn't a race. You didn't have to be fast to win this one, and it was completely random. So I really kind of liked that one. I think it was pretty cool. So anyway, Greg, congratulations, man, on your win. Good job. All right, so that was fun. Patron giveaway. All right, let's see. What do we have coming up next? What is next on the agenda? It is Q&A. Okay. I'm going to check comments before we get into Q&A, and I don't see any. I need to address. So we can move right on to Q&A. So we're going to go into the Blackboard, and how about that? The Q&A group is sitting right there. It's almost like I planned it. Where's Robert? Robert's not here. Anytime I miss a button, he's like, one job, John, one job. One job, he tells me. He's keeping me honest. One job. Okay, here's this reviewer Q&A. In case you guys aren't familiar with this segment, if I see a question that I think might benefit more than one person, I'd like to bring them on the PilotJam Q&A so more than one person can hear the answer. So G. Poi Fernandez says, what's the purpose of flashing the receiver? And my answer to him was to update the firmware. So very direct question, very direct answer. Now let's spend a little more time on that because I hate that sounded lippy because that wasn't my intention. But I mean, he asked a straight question and I gave a straight answer, right? So the purpose of flashing it is to update the firmware. Now, if you might say, why are we updating the firmware? That's a much more detailed question. And I would say the answer to the reason we update the firmware, and remember, I've said this before to you guys too. When it comes to firmware, don't get caught in the trap. Just because there's a firmware release doesn't mean you have to jump on it, right? What I recommend when it comes to firmware releases is pay attention to the changelog. Look at the changelog, see if there's something you need. If there is, then I would still wait for a little while because let's face it, how old are you and you've lived this long without it? You can go another week. Give it a little time. Let people who are willing and able to test and who can afford or absorb a crash or a problem, let them figure it out. Unless you're willing to do the work. Unless you're willing to take the risk. If you're willing to do the work and take the risk, then go ahead and flash away and knock yourself out, especially if it's for a feature you're heavily invested in like I was with S-Bus. So when I was pushing S-Bus on Express LRS, when they did it, I put it on a jet and flew it because I wanted to know, is it going to work? So I put my money where my mouth was, right? And that's the kind of answer that I would give to G. Poi Fernandez. When it comes to flashing firmware, you should know how to flash your firmware on your devices, and you should keep an eye on the change logs so that if you see something that addresses a problem you have, or if it's a critical issue or a security concern or whatever, then flash. Learn how to do the work flashing, and that's my response. That's how I think about this problem. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Let's see. This is from, can I read this? It says Jay Grotzema. He says, very cool. Now I have a plug-in hybrid. Oh, remember when I was telling you in the beginning video, at the beginning of the video, I said, you know how the Earth compared to the sun looks like just a little speck going across the surface of the sun? And then you think, wow, the sun is big. That's kind of how it is with my little 6L 5000. That's Earth, and my 100 amp hour, 2500 watt hour battery bank is like the sun, right? And you think that's big, and it sounds big, but you say that until you read the next comment. He says, hey, that's a cute little power station you've got there. I've got a plug-in hybrid with 12 volts coming from a 15K drive battery. So 15K, to put this in perspective, my little measly 200 watt hours, which I think is like the size of the sun, is 0.2. So he's talking about 15. My batteries are 0.2. So he's got a 15K. If we added my batteries to his setup, he'd have a 15.2K setup. So how cool is that? How cool is that? That's like the Stevenson, whatever it is, Stevenson 218, the biggest star we know of. That's it. He's talking about a hybrid with a 15 kilowatt drive battery, and he can pull his power from that. Yeah, I would say you can charge batteries pretty much indefinitely with a battery that size. That kind of made me laugh when I saw that. I thought that was very cool. Very funny. Very funny. It sure gives you a view on perspective, doesn't it? Okay, thanks for sharing that one. Let's see. Dan Martin, he says, I have a Life Field box and an iCharger, but I just use my iCharger to charge the battery bank. I haven't needed a dedicated Life charger yet. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Yeah, you can use, for sure, right? You can use a dedicated charger. You can use a, do I have the camera on this one? I don't see it. Wow, I don't have the camera on this one. That's rude. I guess we'll have to switch to the big camera. But yeah, you can either use a dedicated charger like this, and I do it for simplicity's sake, and because that way I can leave it in the garage and not haul it back and forth, worry about where it is, where did I put it, that's why I did it, but obviously there's lots of different ways to do this, and that's the kind of the idea, right? The idea is, hey, there are options. And so if you don't want to buy a dedicated Life charger, just be aware that a lot of these Lipo chargers have Life profiles in them. So a lot of them do. Check them. A lot of the toolkit stuff does. And that's it. I think I'm not going to talk about the other brand. We're not talking about them. Yeah, we're not going to go into that. We'll leave that alone. But the toolkit does, and of course the iCharger does as well. So yeah, you use whatever charger works for you. Again, I use the one I did for simplicity's sake, just to keep it easy. All right, JST4GZ says, should I remove when it says fast charge done or wait until the totally done? This is an interesting question. And the answer, in the strictest sense, the answer is that you could fly when the fast charge is done, depending on how, it kind of depends a little bit on the logic of your charger. But you'll notice that in most of these devices, there are two modes. There's fast charge and slow charge. Fast charge maintains a constant current. So if you ever watch your battery charge and you notice you set the current at 5 amps and it stays at 5 amps until it gets near the end, and then it switches over and lowers the current to a lower value, that's a switch from constant current to constant voltage. So what that's basically saying is, hey, we're kind of getting close to being full up. We don't want to keep slamming the current in because we don't want to overcharge the battery. So let's go into a constant voltage mode and we'll adjust the current as necessary to ease that voltage up to 4.2 volts per cell. So the answer to the question is, the proper way to do it is to wait for it to finish charging and stop at 4.2 volts per cell. Now that said, can you fly if it's not at peak? Sure. Yeah, you can fly when it's not at peak. No problem. But it's not something you probably want to do regularly. But I'm not going to lie. There have been days into the field where I'm like, one more flight. I'm just going to, take this last battery up for a quick flight. I don't even run the battery all the way down. So if I'm not, there's no reason to sit and wait for it to go to 4.2 just so you can run it back down again. If you know the bottom line is you don't have to peak it at 4.2. That's the bottom line. I actually peak mine these days at 4.18 because it helps extend the life of LiPo batteries. So, but because I set 4.18 as my peak voltage, I still do allow it to finish because that means that all the cells are balanced before I go fly. Now, again, there's so much conversation that can be had around this because you can talk about things like, well, what if I'm at 4.18 on one cell and 4.17 on another? Is that a problem? Probably not. Probably not, because if you stop flying when you're supposed to at, say, 3.6 volts per cell and one's at 3.5, is that a problem? No, not really. It's not going to damage the cell. But that's why I always land with a safety buffer, because I don't want to find out that I have one weak cell and I pushed it past the mark and now it's actually contributing to a more unhealthy battery. Does that make sense? So it's an interesting question filled with a lot of nuance, but you just have to think through the problem. The answer is you should probably wait till it's finished so you have a fully balanced pack before you start. But the reality is the balancing only really matters at the top end of the range and the bottom of the edge of the range. It doesn't really matter that much in the middle of the range unless you have a severe discrepancy, say a half a volt difference between two cells. In that case, you shouldn't be flying that battery anyway, because it probably means you got some pretty nasty IR on one of your cells, right? That makes sense. But yeah, do pay attention to the concept that you've got constant current and constant voltage, and you minimally want to get it past the fast charge, and you probably should let it balance charge. That's the correct way to do things. All right, number 5, this discharger can discharge faster than using a light bulb, I presume. This goes right back to why we spent a little time in the calculator, right? I wanted to go through that calculator tonight to give you guys a tool so you could say, hey, how does this math work out? Look at it. If you can do the math, right? If you can say, well, I've got a 100-watt light bulb, you can come in here and say, I've got a 100-watt light bulb, and I know that light bulb is running on 120 volts. That means my current is 0.83. So if that's your discharge, you're at by the way, your discharge is still 100 watts. That's the real number. So if you're at 100 watt light bulb, your current's 0.83, you're discharging at 100 watts. Now the question is, if you were to take the discharger that I made and you do the math and find out that discharger discharges at 159 watts, then the discharger discharges at a higher rate than your light bulb will. That's the key. You got to look at the watts. That's why I'm starting to look at watt hours, because that gives you the true measure regardless of your voltage, right? So that's why it does that. So anyway, there's that one. The answer to that question is do the math. It depends on your light bulb. I mean, I can't answer your question without knowing what wattage your light bulb is, right? That's the problem. You have to know the wattage. And once you know the watts, you can do the math and figure out the rest for yourself. It's pretty easy. All right, let's see. Dad Dog says, great video. I was thinking, and maybe it's not a great idea, but would it be possible to use a stack of Peltier modules instead of the resistors? And this is, again, I love this type of question because I've been thinking about those Peltiers. And the only reason I didn't do it was, well, 2 reasons. Number 1, I wanted to keep the cost to a minimum. Number 2, I wasn't sure about mechanically affixing them to this rig. But I am going to get some of those Peltier modules, and I am going to do some testing with those because I think they're a really cool idea. Keep an eye out on the channel. I am going to mess around with those things. I promise you that. So Peltier modules, they're coming up. Hang tight. More on that later. But this is a great question. And if you're not familiar, the idea behind a Peltier module is when you apply voltage, one side becomes cold, one side becomes hot. And it's like the hotter one side gets, the colder the other side gets, and vice versa. So the idea would be to put the cold side against your resistor and the hot side against your heatsink and transfer that energy via the heatsink out. And I know I've seen this used in like water-cooled systems for PCs. So I am very interested in trying it out, and I do intend to give it a go. I intend on taking a look at a Peltier module on a discharger. So hang tight for that. Great question. I like that question. John Larson says, excellent tutorial for a useful tool for discharging to storage voltage. I've used the BG8S tester to charge my USB devices, phones, tablets, and earbuds, but I don't have a good LiPo killer. Thanks for sharing. You're welcome. And by the way, this is a great way to dispose of your LiPo batteries. The only thing that I would say about the LiPo batteries, if you're going to use it as a killer, just make sure you're safe, okay? Make sure you do it in a safe way. I don't really recommend doing it in your house because if you have some form of internal damage on your battery, it's going to cause you, it could catch on fire. All right. If you have an internal structural damage on your battery, it can cause you fire. So don't do it inside your house. If you have a damaged battery, take that to a disposal station. But if you have an otherwise perfectly healthy battery that's just past its prime, it's got some high IR, it's a little puffy, go ahead and put it on a LiPo killer and drain it to 0, solder the leads together, and dispose of it according to your belief system. Okay. But the point is you don't need special handling once you kill it. So it's awesome to have a LiPo killer at your disposal because for a long time, I collected a lot of dead LiPos until I figured out what the correct way to dispose of them was. I just did. So it's nice to be able to do it on my own. I don't have to worry, and I don't need anybody else's help. All right, next question came from technical support 6983. He says, I use a 12 volt 4 amp ductile fan for discharge. See what I mean? This is what I mean about the exchange of information. There's lots of different ways to discharge. Lots of different ways to do it. There's commercial products. You can use light bulbs. You can use the little, I don't know. I didn't label this one yet. I might call this one the captain. No, maybe the lieutenant. The lieutenant in the Navy is a little junior. This is a little device. I might call that the lieutenant instead of the admiral or the captain. Captain in the Navy is pretty high up there. It's one step more and you got a star. So not the captain. We'll call that one the lieutenant. Or the ensign. That'd be even better. The ensign. That's the low end. All right. So yeah, lots of different ways you can discharge stuff. But the point of the matter is have a discharger. And I think somebody else left a comment. I'm not sure if I used it. Here it is. Just Keep Living FPV says, awesome. I've been needing to build myself a discharge unit so I don't overwork my charger. Exactly. That's exactly the point. That's why you have these. And by the way, I just want to throw something else out there too. Let's have, hold on. I had to get some hardware out that I wasn't thinking about for this PilotJam, but I wanted to cover this concept with you guys because it's one of these. I've read so many reviews on chargers, and one of the ones that really cracks me up the most is when people come in and they look at a device, whatever the device is, and they say, "Oh, that thing's a piece of crap. It doesn't discharge. It doesn't discharge anything." Okay, let's spend a minute on this. Okay. Let's just spend a minute on this. You know, I was talking earlier about density and weight and all that stuff. So here's what it comes down to. Take a look at this. That is the Admiral. That's capable of I think it's 450 watts and 17 amps, 17, 18 amps. This is a little FD200. That's a 200 watt device. It can go up to, I think with a 6S battery, I think it can do like 5S or 4S, something like that. And then here's an iCharger. And when you are discharging using this, it's something like 30 watt limit, I think. It's not much. Very, very low discharge rate. Now, and then here's the Ensign. And look at that compared to the Admiral. Look at the size difference compared to the Admiral, right? What this comes down to, and this is the secret sauce. You know, it's like the common sense piece that escapes people. This is about mass. You're dispensing with an incredible amount of energy. You just look at this battery and you don't think much of it, but this battery is a 5,000 milliamp hour. That's a 5 amp hour. That means it can run 5 amps for an hour until it to zero. Okay. That's a lot of energy in this little package. That's why we fly with them, because these have highly dense energy sources, right? And they make enough power for us to fly. That's why we fly with these, the Lipos. So there's a lot of density here and weight. Look at that. It says 110 watt hours right there. 110 watt hours. Okay. That's a lot of freaking energy. And if you're going to dispense with all the energy that's stored inside this thing, guess what? You've got to dispense of the heat. You have to move the heat out. This is about mass, guys. It's about thermodynamics and moving heat. You got to take the heat, the wattage that comes off of this, and move it out. So think about this for a moment. Okay. Think about this for a moment. If I'm running a 17 amp device at 450 watts, everyone on this session knows what a 100 watt light bulb is. Okay. You all know what a 100 watt light bulb is. Okay. Here's what I want you to do. Go turn 4 100 watt light bulbs on a bench, in your ceiling, wherever you have to do it. And then unscrew them and hold them in your hand. Right? 4 of them. Think about that. Think about that. Think about that heat. So it kills me when I see comments of people who come in and go, oh, this stupid little charger can only do 50 watts of discharge. Yeah, no crap. It's because it doesn't have any ability to dissipate heat, you knucklehead. You got to be able to dissipate heat. This is a little tiny device. This can't move any heat. It's a little tiny discharge. Little tiny. It's like this one. This is only 140 watts, 150 watts. It's not much. Right? Little tiny discharger. And this thing gets freaking hot. I mean, it gets hot. You would not, when you're discharging a 6-cell battery, you would not want to walk up and go like that and be like, oh, you'd be like that guy in Indiana Jones who reached into the fire and picked up the medallion and burned his hand. That's what you would do. It's not that hot, but it's freaking hot. You know, you got to dispense with the heat. That's why if you want to move and do a heavy discharge, you have to do stuff like this because this can move some heat. Look at the size of that compared to the iCharger. It's ridiculous. And this is all heat shrink and fans. Look at all the fans. And those fans are all spinning at 12 volts. Man, it's ludicrous. You have to be able to move some heat out. Same with the FD200. Look at the FD200. And that's only 200 watts, but and it's heavy. But look at that compared to a charger, right? It's like 4 times the size of a charger, almost, right? So I wanted to go through this because you got to be able to move heat, man. You can't look at a little charger and say, oh, that thing's a piece of junk. It only discharges at 50 watt. Yeah, okay, come on, man. That doesn't make it a piece of junk. That means it's engineered correctly. It doesn't have the ability to move heat, so they got to slow that discharge down. Now you're gonna go, well, wait a minute, John. Whoa. They can do regen discharge. They can do advanced extra discharge. Yeah, that all gets transferred. That heat's not being dissipated by the device, right? This is not the thing dissipating the device. When I connect the Admiral to this device, the Admiral is where the load comes from, not the charger. The charger is simply directing the flow of electrons. And it's saying, hey, let's go ahead and pull some electrons out of the battery, run it through the resistor, and then we'll complete the circuit back to the battery. So that's all that's going on. This becomes the load, not this, okay? That's the big difference. In this environment, there is no charger, so this is the entirety of the load. Same with your light bulb. You plug a light bulb in, that light bulb is the load. There's nothing else that requires it. So don't get caught up in this idea of regen. If you do a regen, so if I were to take 2 batteries, let's say I have this big battery here as my source, and this one is my flight pack that I want to discharge. By the way, that's how my car works now. My car has the big battery. I can regen into my big battery. So all I'm doing, technically we are discharging this battery, but we're not dissipating the current, right? We're simply moving the electrons into this battery. We're simply relocating where the energy is stored. We're not creating heat because we're not consuming it, right? We're not consuming the energy. There is no heat consumption. We're simply moving it. Now, when I say none, of course, there's some, but it's not, it's conversion loss, right? It's movement loss. You're moving stuff around. That means you need energy. That means you're going to create some heat, but it's not like discharging. Like if I take this and regen discharge into this guy doesn't get hot at all. And I can do that at, I don't know, something like 30 amps or something crazy, right? Very high rate. And if I'm using my Admiral as the discharger, I can set it at like 17 amps. But in that case, we are not relocating the energy. We're dispersing it. We're converting the energy to heat. Okay. So you have to dissipate the heat. And that's the way that works. So let's go back to that one because that was a little bit of a riff, but man, it's one of these things where I see these comments and it's not just keep living. It's not him, right? I brought it up because it got me thinking about people who talk about the idea of using the charger as a discharger. And then I hear complaints like, oh, that discharger sucks because it can only do 1 amp. Nope. That's not why. That's not the problem of the charger. It's because it's not what it's designed for. And that's why it's a good idea to have a discharger because then you can pull it down at a reasonable rate and you don't have to sit and watch it for an hour and a half at, half an amp or something crazy. Hopefully that makes sense, but this is a trick about learning, man. You got to pay attention to facts, right? There's observational information out there. If you say I want something to be able to discharge at 18 or 20 amps, you better be thinking about some way to dissipate that energy, right? Because it's got to go somewhere. It's got to go somewhere. You can't destroy it. It has to go somewhere. That's the way it works. Okay. And by the way, when you discharge, you're not destroying the energy. You're converting it to heat. All right, let's see. Question number 10. I have a Maytech ELRS R24P, and there's a problem when I connect the battery. It doesn't always work. Oh, yeah. Sometimes the transmitter and receiver bind, everything's normal, but when I connect to the ESCB. Okay, what I wanted to say about this one, and this is a little pro tip for you guys. I like to set my Express LRS receivers to have a very low Wi-Fi on time. So what that means is that when I turn on a receiver, I want it to either bind to my radio right away or I want it to hop on my Wi-Fi network because I want to flash it. So what I've taken to doing is I set a fairly aggressive Wi-Fi on interval on my receiver, and my transmitter for that matter, of about 20 seconds. And the reason I do that is because I found with some testing that every single time I turn the receiver on, it can bind within 20 seconds, especially if I set the init rate to equal the transmitter's rate. So for example, if I've got a transmitter set up at 333 hertz, then I set the init rate on the receiver, which you can do via the Lua. Oddly enough, it's not in the web UI, at least not that I'm aware of. If you know where you can manipulate that in the web UI, leave a comment after the video or even in the chat. But I'm not aware of anywhere that you can do it in the web UI. I only know about doing it in the Lua itself. So anyway, you go in the Lua and you can set the init rate. And by setting the init rate to match the packet rate on the transmitter, what happens is they bind instantly because the receiver is no longer cycling through the different packet rates looking for a match. Does that make sense? So you have to do the init rate. If you do the init rate, that will help your bind process occur much quicker. Okay, so that's the answer for Zombie Man. Make sure you set your init rate. I do that as a matter of practice at this point. And that brings us back to number 1. So we are done with the Q&A. And that's it. I'm gonna bring the desktop back up. Then I'm gonna check comments, and then we're gonna talk about what's coming up, and then we're gonna close out the video. So let's see here. Mitch Gentry. Oh wow, let's see. I'm looking for where I lost you guys. I got $5 on the green. Hit the super chat. Okay, congratulations to Greg. 1 in 14, pretty freaking good odds. Yeah, those are pretty good odds. That's good for the patrons. Pretty good odds. Good way to do the giveaway. Well, good. I'm glad you like that. I really wanted it. I always want everything to be fair. You know, I always want it to be fair. So I'm glad you guys like that one. Robert just got home from work. Robert, glad you could make it, man. Freddie got home from work too. He was out flying, I think. Working on watching the PilotJam. Yeah, it's work when we're doing math, huh, Fred? All right, let's see. Four Eyes. Victor's here. Hit the tip jar. Victor hit the tip jar for $10. Thanks, Victor. Appreciate that. Hello from Jacksonville. Hello from Central Florida. Very nice of you. Thank you, my friend. Hobie got his new 24-volt power supply all wired up. Very nice. Yeah, 24 volts, man. It is the way to go. 24 volts. You can always use less, but the chargers, I mean, it's just the way to go. I'll tell you a quick little anecdote when I get to the end of this. Let's see. Mitch Gentry hit the tip jar. Thank you. Appreciate that. Celebrate the first super sticker from Mitch. Thank you, Mitch. Appreciate that. The hills have FPV. How close should each cell's internal resistance be to each other? If new pack has some high IR cells, will stores accept it for a return? Well, it kind of depends on the store you're dealing with, but you know, if it's Amazon, yes. If it's a reputable store like RC Battery, I'd say they probably would. I don't really have a hard number on IR, but I think I'd say about one ohm is about what I look for. 1, maybe 2. If it starts getting past that, yeah, that's no good. And I think it's not ohms. I'd have to check. Is it micro ohms? I'm not sure. I'll have to check. But I prefer to see it very low. I don't like a big discrepancy. And then in addition to the IR, the other thing I also pay attention to is how much it puffs. So if it starts getting puffy and I can squish it, I can squeeze the pack and I feel that's it. That's it. At that point for me, they start losing. I can feel that they've lost some of their power. So I stop using them at that point. 41 watching, 27 likes. Well, thank you, Robert. Yeah, hit the like whip. If you guys can hit the like, man, that's really helpful. It is really helpful to hit the like button. It helps with placement. Lets YouTube know that you like the content and that you're interacting with the video, and helps the algorithm place my stuff, blah, blah, blah. So if you can hit that, it'd be nice. Mr. Blue Sky says, I'm using Spectrum Smart Checker to balance cells. Hope that's a good idea. Sure, yeah. Anything you can use to balance them is good. Just make sure, check your calibration. That's what I would say. Make sure you check your calibration. Even on the iChargers, for me, which have a reputation for being very well calibrated from the factory, I still check them. And I have a couple of them now, and I've still had to make minor adjustments to the iChargers, but once I made the adjustments, they're pretty solid after that. But the big trick is to make sure you check the calibration. Don't believe the calibration. You need a meter that you trust. I have a Fluke. That's my baseline, and I don't have lab gear, so I can't get too sensitive, but I do believe the Fluke is very accurate, and that's kind of like my baseline, and I use that for calibration. So... Hobie hit the tip jar as well. I thank you, Hobie. That's very nice. Let's see how many tips we can get for RCVR. Thanks, man. I appreciate you guys. Very nice of you. Hit the like button and the tip jar. Very good. The hills have FPV. If you apply heat against one side and have a heat sink on the other side, also generates electric. Yeah, that's right. The Peltiers. That's right. Yeah, that's another gimmick that I kind of wanted to mess with. That might be a fun way to run an LED or fans or something like that, right? That'd be kind of neat. Let's see. Blue Sky. Use my M6D. M6D is a good charger. That's the one I have. That's my secondary field charger. I agree. That is a good charger. It's Joey Lowe says RC video reviews. I have to apologize because initially I had you confused with one of the other representatives from Motion RC because of your voice. I'm sorry about some of my past questions didn't make sense. Okay, well, fair enough. Yeah, definitely not a representative of Motion, not at all. Lieutenant Dan, that's funny, man. Hobie says Lieutenant Dan for the little one. Should we call it Lieutenant Dan? I like that. I like that. He's even. I'm not going to make jokes about the legs. I refuse to go there. Yeah, Lieutenant Dan, though. That's a good one. Bradley Norton, where's the best place on Discord to ask battery charging, calibration of chargers and batteries? Electric Power. We have an Electric Power channel, but don't be afraid to get in there, Bradley. You know, we're not too particular about it. Just get in there and ask and you know, try and do your best to keep it topical. But we do have an Electric Power channel. That'd be a good place to do it. Fast Freddy says, no, but I've been on real big boat before. I missed the question. My preferred method. I missed that thread. Sorry, guys. The hills have FPV. I take my old packs to the laptop repair store, and they take them for free regardless of voltage. Yeah, you can do that. You can do that. Not a bad idea. And Robert gave out the link for Discord. Well, I appreciate that, Robert. Thanks. Yeah, if you guys are not on Discord, you got to join Discord, man. It's such a great community there. I love our Discord. Great people, very pleasant to be around. And what I really enjoy about what's going on our Discord right now is how I'm seeing a lot of people getting involved in helping. Guys, give me just a minute. I've got to go on mute and get a drink. Okay, sorry about that. These long sessions, man, I'll tell you what, the voice tries to go on you, so I apologize for the interruption. But all right, let's see. Discord. Yeah, definitely get on Discord. I love it there. We have a great little community on Discord there. Mr. Blue Sky says, I'm running my chargers from a 12 to 18 volt 30 amp power supply. Very good. Very good. If that works for you, there's nothing wrong with 12 volts if it works for you. Now, if you start getting into, 25 volt batteries, that might change your mind, because what happens is and I told you I've got a little anecdote for you. We'll cover that in just a minute. But when you start getting higher voltage, your amperage goes up. So just keep that in mind. Doesn't change your consumption. The consumption is still the same. It's just the way it's delivered to you is different. Lower push, higher current, right? The hills have FPV says, can you use the battery to power a freezer to cool the discharger? Yeah, you could. Yeah, these batteries, yeah, the big ones, they can definitely power a freezer. I don't think that's a problem. In fact, I think a lot of these Lipo batteries are used in solar power walls for backup and stuff like that. Robert says, you must have a really understanding wife, John, to let you put those batteries in her car. Mrs. C must have. That's my car, dude. That's my car. That's my car. T. Evans says, just for fun, I discharged 6S5000 using one of those tiny pocket discharges 24 hours. Yeah, that's right. Just to get it 3.8 and then to the balance charge. That's the problem. Yeah. And it's all about mass. That's the question you guys have to, it's all weight. Listen, you can't hide from weight. And I say that about batteries. I say that about motors. I say that about dischargers. Mass matters. So when you have questions about, well, what size motor? Is this motor comparable? Look at the weight. If you have the same question about a battery, look at the weight. Now, there are some new technologies like the graphene. They're making a change. The solid state batteries. I know Liperier's got this Liperior Air out there, and they seem to be a little bit lighter. But the jury's out. I haven't used them yet, so I don't have a point of view. But I'm going to stick with the idea that weight will tell you a lot about what's going on, and it'll give you a method of making fairly easy relative comparisons. So if you've got a motor that weighs, 250 grams and another one that weighs 125 grams, you say, which one's more powerful? Take a guess. The one with the mass, that's going to make the power, right? So just throwing it out there, man. Mass matters in this hobby. It definitely does. All right, comment. Let's see. Can confirm my toolkit RC chargers needed calibration 100%. Yeah, and keep an eye on your toolkit chargers, because what happens is they're using the onboard STM for their ADC conversions, and that is known to drift instead of using a dedicated converter, which don't drift. That's the problem with toolkit, is they use the onboard STM, and they are known to drift. Mr. Blue Sky hit the tip jar. Thanks for that, man. I appreciate you. $10 from Colorado. Appreciate you there. Very nice. Very nice. Thank you. Can I get a channel? Says I enjoy Discord very much. Well, I agree. Discord's a great place. Great, good, helpful people there. And everybody benefits. That's the other thing I've been driving people to. Don't send me emails asking me for personal help. Get on Discord and ask there, because I might answer, but somebody else might as well. And we are kind of a self-regulated community. Everyone watches. So if somebody says something that's not right, normally you don't, but if someone does, there's a correction. They say, well, that's not exactly correct. Here's the truth. But it's very polite. Everyone's very polite there. So definitely get on Discord, no doubt. Can I get a channel? Says Graphene and Invention Dr. James Tour, the molecular biologist. I never got a graphene battery. I never bought one. They just seemed, I don't know. I didn't buy into it. Maybe I should try one. I probably should. Bradley says, wonder what the cops would do when they pull John over and see the car charger. I don't know, man. I'll try and not get pulled over. So my objective is to not find out. There's these super cheap Talon single ESCs. I'm going to find out. Talon single ESCs. I'm going to find out. Okay. Totally agree. Hobie Skywalker's been really good to me. You know, I actually, on that note, I installed, that's on the coming up section, which is coming up here. I have the ZTW installed in 85 inches, so we're going to fly that. And yeah, a lot of people on Discord. That's right. It's a good conversation tonight in chat. You guys are active. That's great. I love to see that. All right. That is it for, I'm caught up on comments, and let's go ahead and move into the closing round here. And that's what's coming up. So what's coming up, I already gave part of it away. I'm the only reason I haven't ordered Peltiers yet is because I want to find 24 volt. I know they're there. I've just got to find some. I think I've seen a couple on Amazon. But I want to find 24 volt Peltiers if I can. So more to come on that. I know I can get 12 volts. Those are easy. Got plenty of those available out there. And then of course, once I do that, I'll have to come up with a different structure and figure out how to assemble those or add them to the design. Maybe this would be a good candidate for that. I might be able to just lift this up and pop a Peltier in, put some longer screws in and be ready to go. And of course I have to buy another pack of screws because I think these 50 millimeters, the longest I have. So that would probably be a requirement, but yeah, I'll have to think about that. I'm definitely interested in doing the Peltiers. More to come on those. More to come on that for sure. Also coming up is the 85 incher needs to go up again because it's got the ZTW G2 ESC that's installed now. You know, funny thing about installing an ESC, you wouldn't think much of it, but to install an ESC, man, I had this office was torn up. The motor's got to come apart. The props come off. I mean, you're halfway into the plane. It's a big job to change the ESC. It's like the heart, you know, it's like heart surgery. A lot of work. John, if they said anything, just tell them it's a hybrid. Yeah, there you go. It's a hybrid. I'm trying to save the world. It's electric. Yeah, that'll get me out of all kinds of trouble. James Tour is a very good advocate for Christ. I would know. Okay. Ace Hardware for MM Hardware. Yeah, I guess, Hobie. I'm gonna have to go there. I keep getting these packages on Amazon. You know, they're kits. I got an M3 kit now. I guess I'll need a longer M3 kit maybe. Okay, so the G2 is coming up, and then that is it. I still don't have any airframes inbound. I'm still kind of looking around for different airframe ideas. And obviously the testing with the field situation. You know, we got to get that up and running and run some batteries through it and see how it does. My intention with that, by the way, is after I take it to the field and run it for a day, my objective is to write down what I charge and get myself a list. And then when I come back, I'll recharge the batteries and I'll use something like the iCharger, which does logging, and it'll give me an idea of how much energy we put back into the batteries. So that's the idea, just to get a flavor for how well it does and what kind of performance I can expect long term. But I do believe that these batteries, you know, if I'm looking at my 6L 5000s, 20 charge cycles. I mean, I've never, even if I did the 85 incher, that would be 10 flights on the 85 incher. And I've never had a day at the field where I've flown that plane 10 times, not once. So I think it'll be plenty. Oh, and by the way, I lied. That's right. I don't use 6L 5000s in the 85 incher. I use 6L 4000s. That's 25 charges, means 12 flights. So yeah. And I guess if I bring the Laser 260, that's 6L 5000. That'd be 20 flights, or say 19 flights on the Laser 260. It's just going to be a lot of power. I can't wait to use it. I'm very excited about using it. I know I'm getting my geek on with battery stuff lately. I can't help it. I love batteries. All right. I bought a few. Okay. Ace of the Plays. Pretty amazing stuff. John is always talking to RC, taking RC to the next level. Appreciate all your hard work and time and knowledge. Well, thank you, Bradley. I appreciate that. Always trying to push the envelope, man. If I can push myself real hard, then hopefully you guys can draft off that and come up with some ideas to make your RC life more enjoyable and have the right tools, right? Have the right tools in your hand. All right, I want to see you get 12 flights in a day. Well, come. I guess maybe next time you come up, maybe we can go for that. 12 flights in a day is not hard. 12 flights on just the 85-incher, that's a lot of charging, man. That's a lot of charging. Ryan P is on it, man. Extreme Flight needs to restock. I know. And their container got pushed to 10.2. That's the sad part. There's nothing, man. They're out of everything. Although, if you need the solar shields, they got those back in stock. Those did show up. So I just noticed that the other day. If you need some solar shields, those came in. So the 35cc white is back in stock again. Love you to get 2 of the Freewing MiG-29 with vectors. Well, they sent them to me. I'll tell you what, though, man, on jets, I have a hard time with jets. I got the F-22. I flew it. It's fun. It looks cool. But, man, 3 minutes, and that's it. What I do like flying is the Avanti. The Avanti is really cool. Can I get a channel? Says, I miss the old Radio Shack. I do, too, man. I used to like to go in there and just pick stuff up. And I do. And their solder. They had the best solder ever made. I miss that stuff. Good stuff. Okay, so anyway, I told you I'd give you a little anecdote about power, and then we're going to shut it down. So I gave you everything that's coming up. We got the ZTW test, the power test, the Peltier test. So I've got material on the way in. I'll be messing around with the dischargers, of course, trying these out over time, seeing how they perform and everything. But I told you I'd give you a little anecdote, and I'll shut it down with this. So I was at the field, and this whole 24-volt, let me just give you a story. It's this whole 24-volt versus 12-volt thing and understanding the math. So I'm at the field, and I took my field box, and I put it on our DC rail, and our DC rail is 12 volts. And when I started charging the batteries at 10 amps each, so I want to see, we'll do another pop quiz. We'll see who's been paying attention to the math. So I've got 2 chargers connected to a 12-volt DC source. So the charger's connected to 12 volts. They're feeding the chargers, 2 chargers. I start charging at 25 volts and 10 amps. So that, just to give you the hint, 25 volts at 10 amps, that's 250 watts. So 250 watts per charger. So 250, that's 500 total watts. I looked at my panel and I saw 42 amps. Now, who can tell me why we saw 42 amps on the 12 volt rail when I was only asking for 20 on my chargers? Does anybody know? I'll give you guys a minute while you think about that one. And while you're thinking about it, I'll see if there's any other comments. Totally miss Radio Shack. Yeah. I guess they have an online store you can use, but it's not what it used to be. Robert says you need a jet sponsor and a battery sponsor. Yeah, I think RC Battery ought to get on the stick and start sponsoring me. I mean, hell, that's all I really run anyway. The only downside to being sponsored by a battery is I got to be honest with you though, Robert, I don't do battery testing. That's part of the reason I don't, is because there's so much religion around it. So I don't do battery testing, but if they want to sponsor me, I'd put their stuff in my plane and fly it. I like RC Battery stuff. I'm good with that. Terminal Insanity says, I'm envisioning a Raspberry and a camera to track batteries via QR codes. Probably a bad idea, but maybe not. That might be fun. You doubled the charging rate, says Robert. Maybe. If you say rate, I'm going to give you half credit for that, Robert, because voltage does speak to rate. So if you're charging with 12 volts and you're pushing 25, you have to take your wattage, 500, and divide it by 12, right? So what's 500 divided by 12? Is it 42 exactly? 500 divided by 12? 41.666, right? That's the problem. That's the math. That's why you get, there you go, D. Griffiths, math in, watts out. So that's the problem, right? I'm asking for 500 watts, and I'm only feeding it with 12 volts. So the source is only 12 point whatever volts. That comes out to 41.66 amps. The math works perfectly. I looked at it, I'm like, okay, that makes sense, 42 amps, right? It made perfect sense. So that's the anecdote, right? Now you go, well, wait a minute, hold on. If we have 2 6L5000s running at 10 amps each and we're pulling 500 watts, the batteries are fine. The chargers are rated, what are these things? 800 watts? They're ridiculous. It's like 800 watts. And the batteries, that's just 2C for the battery. No problem for the battery. So if we're doing only 20 amps, why is it a problem? Okay, think about the wiring. You have 12 gauge wiring. If you go run 40 amps for 10 minutes and then grab this little XT60, be ready because it's going to be hot, right? Your wiring inside is going to get hot. Your solder joints get hot. Your fans are working harder. You're dissipating more heat. You got more heat energy coming into the system, and you're sagging the daylights out of the voltage rail. So if you look at the voltage rail when you're doing that, you're no longer at 12. You're more like 11.2. And then if Dave shows up or Fred shows up or somebody else shows up and they attach that 12 volt rail and hit it for another 200 and 300, 400 watts, now you really got a problem, right? So this is the moral of the story, right? Voltage matters. The only reason it matters, it doesn't change your energy consumption, okay? If you're asking for 500 watts, it doesn't matter if you're asking for that at 25 volts or 12 volts. When you do that, all you're doing is changing the motive force behind how that wattage or that current is pushed. That's all you've done. You are not changing your energy consumption profile at all. You're simply remember, watts is the product of volts and amps. So watts is constant. You can move volts and amps just like, two buckets full of water, right? You can reallocate your volts and amps. You put your volts up, your amps go down. You put your volts down, your amps go up, right? Your wattage is held constant. Does that make sense? So that's all you're doing is you're changing the format in which you're delivering the power. So you can say, well, is that a problem? Not really. If you're at 42 amps and your system is happy running at 42 amps, you're fine. But the problem I have with that is that you end up sagging it to death. So you don't need to push. So if you switch to 24 volts or 25 volts, now we're no longer pulling 40 amps out, just like in the video I did right there on that video in that car. I showed you when I set those two batteries up to pull 20 amps, they pulled 21. And the extra amp comes from the charger, resistance, the lines, the connections, all the resistance that's added into the circuit. That's where the extra amp comes from. But it was charging at 21 amps. The batteries were set at 20. I was seeing 21 on the panel. Now, in that case, that's much easier on the system, right? The pump, the battery, doesn't have to work as hard. You're not pushing it out as hard because you're at 24 volts. That's why the motive force starts to become meaningful, right? Because now you're not going to sag it as much. Does that make sense? All right, so that's it. That was the anecdote I wanted to give you guys. Think about your volts and amps situation and do what makes the most sense for you. You have to think about how much current do you need, what's your wattage demand. Start with that, and you can reverse engineer everything you need from that point on, if that makes sense. All right, devil's in the details. 41.666. That's right. That's what I got. Let's see. That charging station is beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I built that some time ago, and I love that thing, man. I've been using it for a long time. It's gotten a couple of upgrades. I recently added a 600 watt power supply, but I think with my two batteries in the car, I don't really need to worry about that anymore. So I'm really happy with it. Now I'm curious, what car did you get? I didn't even hear about this. I got a Highlander, Robert, like 5 months ago. I sold the truck, brother. I sold the truck. I bought a Highlander. You haven't been watching my RC Day pictures, because if you did, you'd see all the pictures I post every Saturday morning or Sunday morning when I go fly. Airplanes in the back of my Highlander. And you also didn't watch that video because I said what the car was right about there in that video. I said what it was. It's a Highlander. So anyway. All right, guys. Well, listen, it is 9:07. I had a great time tonight, man. Did we cover some material? I hope you guys feel like more empowered. These kinds of videos are really risky for me as a content creator, because if you know this stuff, you might be like, that's freaking boring, and you click off, or I don't want to hear it, I want to click off, But if you're not sure and you haven't spent a lot of time like messing around with these formulas or kind of playing with it, these videos hopefully give you information to say, oh yeah, now I see how to think about the problem. Because I got to be honest with you, there were a couple of epiphanies I've had in the last 2 weeks, and I understand a lot of this stuff. One of the big ones was just how much a 100 amp hour battery can drink up in terms of current. It was shocking to my system, right, to see that. And then the other one was doing the conversion, thinking about what happens if I'm pulling 19 amps on DC on an AC 120 volt circuit. I honest to God, I thought, I'm pulling 19 amps on the house circuit. That's a lot. And then I thought, no, you know better than this. And I did the math and said, no, okay, now I get it. So that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that this kind of material lets you become more informed, more educated, and helps you design a system that works for you, whether it's a field box like that one, or a discharger like the Admiral, or a little discharger like Captain Dan. I like Captain Dan, Hobie. That was a good call. Little Captain Dan here. You know, when it comes to doing this kind of work and designing your system, having this kind of information and kind of working through some examples and talking about it will help you design it appropriately. So that's what I'm aiming for. You know, that's what I hope you guys picked up on the session tonight, right? Let's see. Hobie says, thank you, John. Thanks for all joining tonight. Appreciate that. GovDeals has a government auction. I got 1,500. Yeah, I've heard about that too. Those big power supplies. That's good too. No way. Add to your stack of videos. I'd like to create a big general. You know, I thought about calling this the general, but you know, I knew these guys would call it general discharge, and I didn't want that associated with my channel, so I called it the Admiral. This is called the Admiral. And it's got 4 stars, just like an Admiral. There's two, so it's a full Admiral. 4 stars. That's the Admiral. Another great show. As always, John, have a great weekend. Thanks, Robert. Appreciate you. Bradley, thanks, John. Great show. Great show today, John, says Mark. Well, I appreciate that. Well, good. I'm glad you guys like the content tonight. Like I said, a little risky to do tech stuff. That's why I said stay. Don't go anywhere. Well, listen, weather in Florida is getting really nice. I'm going to try and get out flying. I still don't have a cameraman yet. Dave's still out of town. I'm not sure if Freddie's on the mend enough to hold a camera, but we'll see. You know, if possible, we'll try and get some flying done on video. But if not, you know, that'll be fine. I do plan on doing some flying tomorrow. I like to get out. The weather's turning, and it's starting to get really nice here, so I'm kind of excited about that. Ryan P says, love the channel. Thanks, John. Well, I appreciate that. Can I get a channel? Says, gentlemen, have a nice evening. Thanks for being here. Sincerely me. Well, I appreciate that. Well, that's it. I think that's a great place to end this one. I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. If you have the opportunity to get out there and fly something, you know what I'm going to say, right? Get out there and fly something. That's all I've got for today. Take it easy.